Hello, everybody. I'm Ben, your daily trader,
And I'm Kagan, your other daily trader.
and today we're going to introduce a new series called Retail Deception. Now, this video alone, we are only going to be covering trend lines and the manipulation of these trend lines, and basically how we can use trend line analysis to our advantage as SMC traders. Now, because there is so much to trend lines, chart patterns, and support and resistance, I've decided to make this a series of 3 different videos, right? And today we are solely going to focus on trend line analysis and how retail views trend line versus how SMC views the trend line. Now, before we go any further, Kagan, do you have anything to say about what you already know about trend lines or chart patterns?
I think I can speak to, anyone for anyone that's, done anything in the market before, where trend lines seem like they're probably like the one of the easier things like, support and resistance and everything like that. But I think trend lines might be probably one of the more difficult things to actually understand because you can draw them in. You can draw one point to another point. But I think what you kind of really need to talk about is how to find the actual correct trend and
Exactly,
figure
exactly.
out how that manipulates the actual chart.
What a lot of SMC is taught, and where I think SMC is going wrong, is they're finding trend lines that are actually not really that important. For
Right.
example, what I see a lot of people teaching in SMC or a lot of educators showing is that we'll have this uptrend and we'll have some sort of buildup coming in right here along this uptrend, right? So this right here would be the trend line, right, that most people are assuming, right, is the manipulation, right? Or they're assuming that this is the liquidity or trend line liquidity right here. Now, it's not wrong to assume that this right here is trend line liquidity, right? Basically, what most people are teaching with trend line liquidity is that, again, there's this uptrend, right? There's possibly some sort of OB or POI down below, and people are simply just waiting for the trend to get taken, right? Breakout traders right here to start going short, right? And then we as SMC traders are hopping in the OB. Well, I'm here to tell you that basically everything right here is completely wrong, right? Now, I'm not despising anybody who is successful trading in general, this type of style and whatnot. It is just not something that works for me. And I feel like there is a whole nother way to actually view trend lines in the market and the manipulation of them, right? In all reality, the way I view trend lines is actually fairly simple. Right now, there are 2 different ways in which I identify a trend line, right? I'm waiting for higher highs and higher lows to enter the market, right? And as most people would see this, these dots, right, these orange dots are making higher highs and higher lows. Basically, my goal is to connect these dots from a lower standpoint, such as here, as well as this point here, right? So we have our upper trend line and our lower trend line. Both of these areas of the trend line and or channel can get manipulated, right? Basically, what I mean by that is we can see price come and hit just a little bit below that trend line, manipulate these lows, and then we'll see it start to rocket, right? Then we'll see it come to the upper part of the trend line a lot of the time, right? Manipulate these highs and then start to come down a little bit more, right? That's not to say it's going to cause the overall move to shoot down. That's also not to say that this move right here is going to cause the overall push. However, we can expect a reaction to occur around these areas of a trend line, right? Now, what is the logic behind this? The logic behind this, again, is that this is where breakout sellers are kind of entering the market, right? Because breakout sellers are entering the market here, what is SMC doing? They're taking basically this OB before, right, where breakout sellers are going short, right? And this is where SMC, we are going long, right? And going against those positions. So that is pretty much the logic behind it, right? Now, this works both in uptrending and downtrending scenarios, right? So we have just saw an example of the uptrend. This would be an example of a downtrend. instead of it being higher highs and higher lows, we are now rather forming lower lows and lower highs, right? So it looks something similar to this. I apologize for my drawing. They're not that good, but I really try my hardest sometimes. Here we go, making lower lows and lower highs. And as you can see, we're looking practically for the same thing. We were waiting for that manipulation outside of the trend line, right? It to mitigate, you know, this right here, right? We clearly see that we have a BOS structurally as well right here. And that causes what? Price to continue down lower, right? Now, again, when I see a lot of educators teaching that is wrong, is that we'll have, for example, price coming up, right, in a trend, and they're going to spot the liquidity that's just building up randomly in an uptrend like so. Oops, I didn't mean to press that. Right, and they're going to be waiting for price to kind of come back down to here before moving up. This doesn't work for me. I tend to stick more to this way of drawing trend lines. Why? What is the difference? In this scenario on the right, this is betting on the internal liquidity of price, right? When we are betting on internal liquidity, you can already assume that your chances of a higher hit rate can go down, right? The likelihood of you actually coming to mitigate this in run is less likely than us breaking outside of the external liquidity and running. Hopefully that makes sense. Within my Discord and my VIP group, I talk a little bit more about external and internal liquidity, right? Hopefully within YouTube as well, I will eventually make some videos on the differences between external and internal liquidity. But yeah, that's basically gist of it in terms of diagrams. Now I kind of want to go back in hindsight, right? I don't want to go in bar replay because the only problem with bar replay is that it's going to take me a very long time to go through each candle by candle by candle. I want to go in hindsight, for time purposes, and honestly, to go in hindsight, it's really the easiest way to show the logic. And from there, hopefully the way I see it in hindsight, right, will help you go back and backtest some of these ideologies. I can almost promise you, if you guys truly backtest these trend lines to notice the manipulation in the market, it's going to help you a ton. I really hope it does. Anyways, let's go ahead and clear our screen here. Let's bring up EU. Right now, first of all, a lot of people are already going to start asking me, does time frame matter? Well, first of all, time and price does matter. The longer the trend line, the more liquidity there is. And I'm hoping just by going back in hindsight, if we just go back and do a little back look of all of this data here, I will be able to show you numerous examples of what trend line manipulation looks like. All right, so let's go ahead and just start the very beginning here, right? And what do we notice? Higher highs and higher lows, right? As soon as we have higher highs and higher lows building up in the market, we want to take our pivot points, right? So we can assume that around this area here is where we can expect price to manipulate and come up. Now, like I said before, we can do the same thing around this area here where we can spot the upper trend line. What do we
So I do have a
notice?
quick question right there.
Go for it.
So before you showed two diagrams, both on the lower trend and the upper trend, right? And
Right.
now we have the two trend lines going, obviously, they're both going up, but one's on the higher side, one's on the lower side. Is
Right.
it expected at this point where we can see that the trend line is actually touching at the top side, that it has to touch the bottom trend line before it actually manipulates it, if that
For
makes
the,
sense?
for the most part, I mean, yeah, if we come and manipulate one side, the likelihood of it coming to manipulate the other is actually very likely. That's kind of how we ping pong price, right? A lot of people are trying to ping pong price from one side to another. This is one way of doing it. Now, this is not my main way of doing it, right? I'm more so looking at where buy stop and sell stop orders are based off of like retail support and resistance, right? In some sort of way. Um, but this is one way of doing it as well, right? So as we can see here, right, what we're expecting for the most part, right, is that we have seen EU manipulate this upper part of the trend. Now you're probably wondering, like, how do I get these positions here? It's actually quite simple. We just need to look back in history and again, mark up our extremes of structure, right? And simply, right, we can see that this extreme over here clearly had a correlation to this manipulation here, right? Do we see how price
So
is sweeping the upper trend in order to come manipulate this POI right here, right? Now, I kind of want to go back in history and show you just numerous examples of how this is happening all the time. Is it something you have to be patient for? Absolutely. Now, I wouldn't recommend going in and start looking for each individual trend line, right? That is what most people are being taught, and that is wrong. Look at the overall picture. Notice how scrunched out my screen is right now on the 15-minute. Now, if that means you have to go to the 4-hour in order to notice some of these movements, then go to the 4-hour. I prefer the 15-minute, right? And then kind of scrunching out my screen to just see how price is moving from a structural standpoint. Now, if I come down here, right, I can already see what is going on and can already understand that there's trend line manipulation happening, right? All I did was identify structure, the higher highs and higher lows. Here's that pivot, right? Here's the manipulation down, right? And simply we did what? We came right back to this extreme here, just like the diagrams I was showing you before. What else was happening? Here's that break of structure that helps what? Confirm this OB here. And then this trend line right here is just further confluence to tell us that price is definitely being manipulated to rocket price all the way up, right? So we could have theoretically caught price all the way from these buys here. And now we know to somewhat start shorting EU right here, right? And theoretically speaking, we can wait for price to come manipulate this part of the trend here. Now, if you think this is crazy, just wait till I introduce chart patterns and support and resistance. Because those, if you think these are already game changers as is, as I'm about to show you in the past, combining more of retail deception is going to open up your eyes to the reality of SMC, right? It's going to show you the true power of how we can actually use some of these concepts, right? Because in reality, what SMC is just finding the traps of retail, right? Let's keep on going
so
back in the future. I mean,
so
trending
having
back, I should be
retail
past. Yeah.
having retail in your background um, obviously helped. And for any new people coming in, because I know we might have some new people trying to find new methods. Would you recommend they learn um, retail as well, or really just try to get into the
So,
SMC,
right. So I will say
LIT?
I have been retail for 6 years, right? And that's what kind of allowed me to see the beauty of SMC was really understanding retail. Now, I wouldn't go and start back testing retail strategies, but I do think it's important, to understand the deception of some of the main concepts out there, right? And the main concepts that are out there in reality is really just trend lines and support and resistance. If you can understand trend lines and support and resistance from a retail standpoint, your SMC abilities are going to skyrocket. Now, is it really necessary to understand chart patterns? No. Oh, but you are going to get much better refinements and you are going to understand the direction of the market so much better if you do understand some of those patterns, right? And in the course of these series, we're going to talk about it. For now, I want to walk you through a couple more examples just to keep this video, a little bit shorter or than it needs to be, right? It doesn't really need to be super long, but I want to get through a couple more examples here just to show you the power of how this all works, right? You can see how simple it is to mark up this structure, right? And now we see that this structure is coming down to the downtrend, right? What do we notice here? The same exact thing. If we just took this pivot point to this pivot point, right, we clearly had what happened in the market. We clearly saw that there was manipulation here and price started to move down. Now, can the trend line expand? Absolutely. This trend line can expand to this pivot point here, right? And what happens? We then have manipulation of the trend line again, right? And then what happens? The market absolutely melts, right? Now that I'm coming back to this over here, I actually missed something and I want to show you a quick little trick before I come back to this example. Remember when I drew in this trend line, a little quick tip that you can do is you can Command C it or whatever your copy button is, paste that trend line and bring it up to this leg. a lot of the time, this channel, we will see manipulation here. Obviously, this example didn't work, but hopefully in the past here, we're going to be able to see some more examples of that technique working out. Now over here, what happened again, right? If we look back in the past, here's more lower lows and lower highs, right? This was a pivot point at some point in time. We can clearly see there was manipulation here and price popped up, right? And as we keep going, right, extend this even further down again, we still see price dip below the trend, right? Manipulate the trend and it starts to pop up, right?
So quickly, how do you know if it's a manipulation or just a point where it's going to bounce off one more time?
So how do I know if price is going to manipulate or break out? Is that what you're
Yeah.
asking?
Yes. Yes.
You don't, well, first of all, we're always going to assume the manipulation, right? Because if we were assuming the breakout, then we are acting as retail, right? Because retail is going to assume selling as soon as that happens. So we're always going to assume the opposite. If you try and switch up your bias, right? You'd be like, oh, well, I'm going to sell this time instead of buy. Well, then in the future, right, you're going against your trading plan. Your trading plan isn't consistent, right? And you're going to end up losing in the market and still trying to figure out why. And or you're going to come back and tell me and be like, whoa, Ben, this doesn't work. When in reality, you're just not sticking to your plan and or sticking to like the main rules. Stick to the rules, stick to one rule set, and you will be profitable using this methodology, right? If we come back into time even more, I want to find an example of how this copy and paste method works. All I need to do is find some higher highs and higher lows. But let's just go ahead, see if we can find some more quick examples. Right, we can see that there is one right here. Here's a little bit of a trend line. We can see the manipulation. We get a little tiny pop. There was a good chance that we probably hit break even on that trade. This is not a 100% foolproof type of trading system, right? Like there is loss involved, right? We're not going to have a 100% win rate. If there's anyone telling you that, definitely close out of the YouTube video as fast as you can. But look, as you can see here, here's some more pivot points. Look, and when I come down, what do you notice? There's that manipulation of the trend, and look what happens. The trend comes further down, right? And we're going to see this happen across all pivot points almost, right? I was talking about macro timeframes, right? If we were to start off at this extreme, right? Perhaps do the next extreme that got manipulated. Let's see what happens. We can see that all of price right here got manipulated, right? And we could have been taking shorts here, 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 or here, just all based off that trend line manipulation, right? We could have gotten into buys here, back into buys here, back into sells here, perhaps back into buys here. We don't even know that's happened yet. I'm not on bar replay right now. I just want to make that clear, right? Like, let's see if this happens in the future, right? Or back test this and see what happens. One last example, because I already see it in the back of my head forming out and it looks good. Here we go, right? Higher highs, higher lows. It looks like we can use that same methodology I was showing you before, but look, here's the same exact thing happening over and over and over again. There's the manipulation of the trend line. Here's that long sustained run. And now what I want to do is, let's pretend that this dot wasn't made yet. Let's just pretend that we just have these two dots here. Let's copy and paste, drag this up to the first leg right here. And what do we notice? Manipulation of the channel. And that causes it to come right back down, right? Please back test this. If this really does help out with your trading, please give this video a massive thumbs up and definitely make sure to subscribe to this channel because, you know, we are going to be producing and pushing as much content as we can on retail deception. As you know, we're probably going to make 2 more videos on retail deception, that being of chart pattern manipulation, as well as support and resistance, which is definitely 2 videos you do not want to miss. Also, if you want to check out our Instagram and talk with us there, our Instagram is at seisners.trading.journal. And we also have a free community on Discord. Make sure to check out that as well. We're going to put all the links in the descriptions for you guys. But I really hope this video helped with you guys. If it did, please leave a like, leave some comments, and subscribe. But other than that, thank you.
Thank you.
Peace.